Yeah, thanks for the nice introduction, Sean. I'm this person, Philipp. What am I? I'm a research officer at the Minderer Foundation in this new brown building next to EWA. I'll talk today about, well, we're a small computational group, but we've been playing quite a bit with GPT models to make sense of our data for others, because we do a lot of fun work around marine park, protected areas. So this is a talk about, here's some nonsense I did, here's what didn't work, here's some other nonsense that kind of works, but nothing really works. And we're going to look at some photos of fish too. So I had to learn a lot about fish in the last year. So first disclaimer is I have some opinions, and they might not necessarily overlap with my employer's opinions and my employer's opinions and my funder's opinions. So just saying here, not necessarily overlapping these opinions. So I'm not representing my employer's opinions. When I was still an academic, I didn't have to do this. So no, I'm just a bit more cautious. What are we doing at Minderer? Just giving you a bit of background where I'm sitting. We try to influence how marine parks are established in Australia currently, and then after that in the world. What we do is we go out with our boat into the ocean, and we sample 10 liters of water here, different depth, different days, different areas, and then we pull out the DNA from these buckets of water, sequence that, and then we try to find out which fish are inside these buckets. It's a bit of a needle in a haystack problem because most of the DNA you find in water is obviously bacterial and viral, and there's a few pieces of fish DNA. What I do mostly is I work on novel methods to speed up this taxonomic identification. So there's going to be like 4 gigs of data coming through, text data coming from the sequencing machine, and I have to find these 500 hits for fish in there. That's a picture from our boat there. It's like a shipping container on a boat. It's got some windows now, so people don't throw up inside the shipping container, so you don't get too seasick. It's Maddie there, extracting some DNA, and then we got a sequencer there in the corner. You can kind of see the monitor from the sequencing machine. First time somebody put that kind of Illumina sequencer on a boat. It's pretty fun. And then we got these 4 pillars, we call them now, mostly on environmental DNA, and I sit in this computational biology pillar. So I don't go out on this boat. It's good. Then my wife would be very mad at me if I'm gone for like 2 months. So what I do is, again, we try to scale up detecting fish from water samples. Currently, we can kind of tell you what lives where, roughly. Ultimately, we want to tell you who exactly lives where. So not just, this is a great big white shark, but this is Bruce the great white shark, for example. And this is his cousin, Leonard, I don't know. So that's kind of our ultimate goal, trying to pull out exact individuals so we can track them over locations. People can do that in crime scenes, so we should be able to do that with fish too. So ultimately purpose, I want to know what lives where, because if you look at the historical data for fish spottings around Australia, it's quite spotty, because it costs a lot of money for these boats to go out there, and once a year they do it, or twice a year they do it, and then that's about it. Ultimately, we're not that much into paper publishing, but we're more into influencing policy, which is pretty fun. Because I used to be an academic before, and I was just very much focused on writing papers. And now I'm focused on influencing policy, which is also fun. Again, it's a needle in a haystack problem. There's very little fish DNA in each sample. There's less than 1%, less than 0.1% the last time I checked. And very, very few fish genomes have actually been sequenced. So if we find DNA and it looks like fish, most of the time, or often I can't tell you what that actually is. Because we just don't have the data. So one of the things, I've only been here with Minderer for a year, and one of the things I've been working on is trying to help people make sense of the data we produce. Like as a scientist back in the past, I would write a paper about the data we generated, and the paper is one potential story this data could tell, right? This is a really hard thing I had to learn as a PhD student, is to actually find the story in the data. And then other people, so we do generate large amounts of DNA. We've been spending all day today uploading this DNA to public archives. And we build large tables, essentially, of fish sightings. On this day, on this latitude, on this longitude, we saw that fish, based on the DNA sample. With some other measurements in there, like how sure are we about that fish, and so on. So again, the paper is only one possible story we could tell. And to actually make sense of the data we generate, you do need some kind of computational skills, which is a bit annoying, right? You need to know a bit of Python, a bit of R to manage all this big data we make. So, and then a while ago, I thought when it got a bit bigger, what if you could use ChatGPT to interact with that data, right? You don't know how to write code. For example, your marine park manager. These guys usually don't know how to write code. They're much better with being on a boat out there and measuring the fish as they go along and using all these fun machines they have. So they usually can't code. But again, what if you could use ChatGPT to summarize the data we generate and also to let people to interact with that data we have? Because again, if we write a paper, it's one story, but perhaps maybe ChatGPT could help us tell many stories. So I have some early failures. I don't have anything amazing. Might be amazing, but some fun things, some fun failures at least. So in one of my early taxonomic classification things, I built like a simple Streamlit app for the lab people just to double check what they see, what comes through. And then I thought, hey, this was like 4 months ago, hey, what if we just chuck the speech that comes out into ChatGPT with a prompt, please tell me something about that, right? Because for general people, some fish detection means nothing. Like there's 6,000 fish or so in Australian water, and if there's some Latin name, they go like, oh, whatever. So I asked back then ChatGPT 3, what can you tell me about Tilodon sexfasciatus? That's one of the species we have here. And then this particular tool, this web page, would then go query the API and pull out a bunch of text. This is what the old ChatGPT would tell me about this particular fish. Fish. It says that's a 6-banded armadillo. Lives in South America. Only species in the genus Tilodon. So all of that is bullshit. The cool thing though is sexfasciatus is Latin for 6-banded, so that part it got right. This one word is correct. This is what's this is what Tilodon sexfasciatus looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stripes. Good. Latin is correct at least. Far more problematic though was when it was kind of correct. So for most people, me including, if it has these kind of correct texts, it's impossible to spot what's wrong. So the text would often read something like this. So this particular fish is within the family whatever, living in large schools of up to 1,000 fish. It's a strict herbivore and it has complex social structures. And then of these facts, one is really wrong. It would be, for example, like an ultra-strict carnivore, for example. Then as a fisheries person, you might spot that, maybe, if you're lucky. But if I look at this stuff, I have to go then and check every single sentence, recheck it again. What did ChatGPT tell me here? This might be bullshit. I can't trust that sentence, I can't trust that sentence, I can't trust that sentence, because that sentence is wrong. So at that point, everything it returns is useless to me, because I can't trust it, right? Oh, and that's GPT 3.5. Who wants to guess what GPT-4 says, the new one? It doesn't know. So it's like, at least it's honest, right? Yeah, cool. At least you're honest. This is in the chat web interface, but if you use the API, you get the same back. Most of the time, it doesn't know. I think personally because it's fairly rare in the training data, right? If most things you ask it about, like code, appears 10, 20, 100 million times because it has Stack Overflow, all of it in there. It has all of various code databases in there, all of GitHub maybe too. So code it's fairly good with. But if you ask it fairly rare things like Australian fish, this is the moonlighter, by the way, it usually doesn't know because it may appear in the training data maybe once or twice. Maybe, or not at all. So at that point I was like, okay, this is kind of pointless. I'm wasting my time on this part here, so let me pivot a bit. This thing came out 3 months ago. I don't know if you can read this. This is a Hacker News post from 3 months ago. This guy is big into this BBC podcast In Our Time. The annoying thing, since it's a BBC, it's half government-funded-ish, so it's not a nice web page. And if you want to search in this podcast, which has been going for more than 1,000 episodes, really hard to search. And they don't have a nice web page or whatever. So he went like, I want to have like a nice web page that classifies all the episodes, puts in all the guests, puts out the duodecimal for the, if you're in a library, it fits here, library, and pulls out the books that I mentioned in there. So he started writing a parser, but then he was like, hey, I can actually ask ChatGPT. I give it the transcript of the episode and ask it, please summarize that, please pull out the guest names, please pull out the books that I mentioned, and so on, and then give that back to me in some kind of format, like JSON, for example. This is what the web page looks like. This is one of the episodes of that podcast. On Alan Turing, and then this text is generated by ChatGPT based on a transcript of the episode. The guests are pulled out. Then the programmer did some extra work on making it a bit nice, of course. And then all these books are also pulled out by ChatGPT based on the transcript. So here it can't hallucinate that much because you already give it all the text it's supposed to summarize. And so I built the first version of my own little tool. Similar to this Bragoscope, to this block summary thing, I wrote an R script that essentially goes through my massive table of sightings and just writes fake English text as an experiment, right? So I've got these sentences, that particular fish was observed in that sample, on that day, on that latitude, at that longitude, and so on. And then I got like, I don't know, 10 megabyte of text like that, because we have many sightings. And of course, who wants to guess whether that works? We come to that, okay. First, I built that, by the way, I built that using LangChain. So if you're interested in these kinds of models and don't want to always work directly with the ChatGPT API, or you don't want to roll your own models and then work with their weird API, LangChain is a really nice wrapper in Python around all these models. And currently, for all of this, I'm using OpenAI's ChatGPT, but this is the line in LangChain to change the used LLM, the large language model in there. So I'm using here OpenAI temperature 0, so please don't try to hallucinate so much. Temperature controls how much it should freewheel, I guess. And then there's a prompt in there. But it would be super easy now to just replace the LLM by anything else. Whatever is supported by LangChain, like Falcon or whatever. This is, by the way, the prompt I wrote for that. So it's a lot of English writing when you work with these models. So template is you and I assistant, blah, 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 blah. When somebody asks you to count a species, please do not make up an answer and say, look at the data I have given you and count the occurrence of all species. Most common means the number of ASVs, like that's the pieces of data we generate that have that species. When somebody asks for a map, please give me a tabular format based on that. This is how it looks like, and this is how you should make it. And down here, please don't lie again. Just say, I'm not sure, please. And this one, in an early version, actually, when I had these tables, I would then just run some pandas on that and just check, is there data from table in this? And then make a map out of that. It's pretty funky, but not very interactive. So, again, who wants to guess whether that worked? Yeah, that's a good answer. The text I make, without chunking it or whatever, is too long for the token limit in GPT-3. So it's got like 5,000 or 6,000 tokens, the standard one right now. Any clever chunking resulted in inaccurate counts and so on, because it would usually undercount, or also you just give me some weird number. The new ChatGPT 3.5 16K came out 9 days ago. That might work, but it's been 9 days. I also have other things to do. So at that point, I abandoned this kind of structure, where I just write fake English text and chuck it in there. So at that point, LangChain had these really nice agent executor tools in there. So what happens is the ChatGPT isn't used to summarize the text, but what happens instead is that you give ChatGPT a bunch of tools and tell it, here, you can write Python code here, or hey, you can ask Google here, or hey, what else in there? I have a list of these tools. The downside is, of course, that it's far less imaginative. If I tell it to run pandas Python on this piece of text I give it, it doesn't do any other hallucinating, but it will just run this Python code, and that's it. But it's far more trustworthy, right? It doesn't actually look at the text that it gets, but it just writes Python code, and the Python code is then run somewhere else, and then the user just gets the results of that. This is how you define these tools inside LangChain. So in this case, we've got three tools. One is the Google searcher, which uses the SERP API thing to Google stuff. But you can Google yourself, so wow, AI. Tool, Oceanomics Data Interrogator, that's a pandas thing that has all of our data in CSV format, so it can run some Python code on that. Then there's a paper searcher here, and I think you're going to hear about these ChromaDB-like things later, right? Are you talking about that, right? About all these. So I'm not going to talk much about this, but I've got like 100 PDFs of papers in there. So if it finds something funky here, it can then go to these papers and see if any of these papers mention these species, for example, if it wants to. And I have a bunch of more tools, but let's ignore these for now. Downside is that this is always funny when it hallucinates tool names. It goes like, hey, he's asked me a question. I should use the flompy plompy. Observation. I don't know what the flompy plompy is. Okay, and then answers to the user, I don't know, man. So very pointless when it does that. Some tools don't know much extra about the data they're looking at. Like, for example, the CSV tool I just had. I've got a column scientific name in Latin, like Tidodon sexfasciatus, and common name in English, like Moonlighter. And the CSV tool currently keeps on confusing the two. Like, if you ask it about the name, it gives you one at random. If you ask it about the scientific name, it gives you the common name, and so on. It's a bit confusing. So that particular tool, you can't really tell that much. And also, it's very hard for users to see what's going on if you run all these tools. Usually, you just get like the final answer by default. And then it just says, the most common fish is blah. So I added chain of thought is a really nice thing. Again, LangChain supports this. Really nice tool which kind of, it's a specific kind of prompt more or less, which instructs ChatGPT, hey, while you think about this, please write what you're thinking about, what your observations are in a specific format, and tell me what you're doing, essentially. So yeah, it's a specific set of prompts. And that's just a little flag in LangChain, more or less, and then it adds that to the prompt for you. This is what it looks like. I'm entering a new agent executor chain. I need to use the oceanomics data interrogator to answer this question. I asked about the most common fish in this example, by the way. It says the action about most common fish. And then at that point, it has to decide which tool am I going to use there to answer. And then, hey, I need to find the most common fish in the data frame. And hey, I need to run Python. And hey, this is the Python code I need to be running. And hey, here's the observation that comes back. The striated surgeonfish. Any fisherman knows why they're called surgeonfish? It's actually pretty cool. They have super sharp side fins, and they cut you to the bone. That's why they're called surgeonfish. If you ever want to cut someone with a fish. I now know the most common fish. Final answer is striated surgeonfish as the return to the person. So it didn't hallucinate. In this case, it can't. It just writes some code for me. So this is how the site currently looks like in total. I've got some question box. On the left, you get this whole chain of thought displayed. And on the right, you've got only the final answer. So before chain of thought, you would get only this annoying sentence here. Is that true? I don't know, man. But here on the left, the user can actually go and kind of check the vibe of the answer, right? Like, what are you even doing, man? How did you get to that answer? How trustworthy is this answer, essentially? So that's where it's currently at. It can write simple Python code, calculate mostly correct result. Actually, who can see the bug in this? Oh, that I have it. Who can see the bug in this? There is a slight mistake in the answer. Yes, correct. So it pulls out the first row here of the result. And like you said, if you got two fish that have the same count, you won't know about this. And again, that's why the chain of thought is also kind of nice because, hey, come back. There we go. Chain of thought is kind of nice because you have to think a bit about what it does, and the final answer is actually wrong. Well, it might be wrong. I have to double check. I don't think it's actually wrong in this case. Lucky. Again, write simple Python code to calculate mostly correct results. That's why I put the mostly there. Use ChromaDB. You're going to hear more about that to answer questions about PDFs of eDNA papers. It also can classify some DNA when the user enters DNA. I didn't show you that because it's not so interesting, for me at least. Can Google stuff for you. Wow, you can do that yourself. What I want to do next is I need to replace the Python agent by an SQL agent because writing machine-generated Python code and running that on my computer without any sanity check is so scary. Right? I haven't seen it yet, but surely there will soon be a prompt where somebody goes, hey, and now import the US library, and now delete everything you can find. So SQL agent is a little bit less iffy, hopefully, but we'll see. This is a really cool paper that just came out, Tree of Thought. I want to add that too once it's a bit better supported. Chain of thought is, again, you saw this, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this. And chain of thought is essentially one step more where it goes, for the next step, think about 5 potential things you could be doing, and then run them all and evaluate, then go back to ChatGPT, which one is the best answer of these 5 things. So it kind of branches out, and you get a obviously, instead you pay like 5 times as much money to OpenAI, but it's far more imaginative. And again, here with the code, I've seen some papers where they simply propose having a second LLM. You give the code to the LLM and tell it, how dangerous is this code? Can this break stuff? And then if it says, yeah, oh, cool, it will actually be run. But of course, then everything takes 10 seconds longer. And then there's a bunch of quality improvements I have to put in, because right now it just plops the answer there. Drawer maps, I will be building a bunch of other tools internally to visualize these results, and then just linking to these visualization tools would be cool at this point. And then I'm kind of sick of paying money to OpenAI, so I want to run some local open source LLMs, but then it's also a deployment issue, right? If you deploy it on your own machine, it's a bit scary. If you pay AWS, it's okay, but then you need a GPU instance to deploy these larger models, and they also cost like $1 an hour or something. I don't know what's the price now. Who knows? And what I'm really interested in is how to best deploy all this, because it's scary as hell, and I haven't really seen any big projects being deployed yet. A lot of toy projects, especially by private people, but nothing that's like company behind it. Okay, and now I've got about 10 more slides where I start to ramble and get angry. You should have a beer here. That would be very funny. Yeah. So my current status is added for drama. Do we have to do something? They kick us out? Are we getting evicted? Mood lighting. Okay, nice. So I don't have many ethical problems with this right now, as if you, for example, work with human stuff, or if you'd work with, I don't know, there's been an example recently where they were using like a, what is it? An eating disorder hotline where the workers were replaced by some ChatGPT, and then a day later they shut it all down because the ChatGPT was suggesting people to diet, and it's not good in an eating disorder hotline. I only have fish. It's not that bad currently, right? I'm not going to kill someone. But again, there's many issues that hop in there. Like currently the answers, and especially this chain of thought stuff, is kind of best for the vibe. Like Vicky Burke has wrote a bit about this in her blog. Like it doesn't give you the perfect final answer, but you kind of know where to start, and it kind of pushes you in the right direction. Especially with this Python code, you know what to kind of write for yourself. You know the papers summarizer, you know which papers to look at, and so on. But I don't know if users actually agree. If I bring this gives this to marine park people, they might just say, yep, striated surgeonfish, good, done, see you later. Yeah, it's not deployed publicly yet, like I said. Python agent terrifies me. It's running inside a Docker container right now, so it's not extremely terrifying, but still scary to run someone else's unchecked code on your machine. And also at Minero, we have a bunch of internal security and reputational risks pipeline with documents to fill out, and it's very boring. I haven't started. Yeah, but what if this thing I'm building is leading to a proposed marine park not getting established, right? It says, yeah, there's nothing interesting in that area, forget about it. It's just sand and dirt and oil maybe, and the environment. But it could have been established, right? It might have been important. So who's responsible for that? Who's accountable? Am I accountable? I don't know, currently people say I might not be, but I should be accountable. And would people even realize that it told people bullshit? You wouldn't know. Another thing is, even if people say, yeah, I looked at it for a while and the answer gave me wasn't so cool, so I went to my next thing, they might still be influenced by the answers they got from these machines, right? In psychology and in economics and so on, there's a bunch of concepts around this kind of nudging or priming. They're a bit controversial, so if you ask a bunch of psychologists, they might tell you no, and the other one say, yeah, that exists. And then there's still a bit of fighting, but especially priming I find interesting is there's a few papers which are hard to reproduce where they give a group of people some unrelated piece of information without any judging, and then the other group didn't see that piece of paper and that piece of information, and a while later they get asked a question that has kind of to do with this piece of information. And then the people who saw this piece of information answered differently than the people who didn't see this piece of information, even though they don't even remember seeing that piece of information earlier, right? So if this thing tells you bullshit and you don't, it might still influence you in the long run. You don't know that. Brains are weird, mushy and confusing. And marine park establishment is also very political and very emotional, right? If you have this quite often here, like a lot of Australians grew up fishing. It's their one way to connect with their dad, for example. Dad always took me out fishing, and now you want to build a marine park here. How dare you? This is how I want to connect to my children. You can't take that away from me. So it gets very emotional and very political too, of course. Fishing industry is large. So of course somebody could then go in and say, hey, look, Minero built this OCEANGPT thing. It tells absolute garbage. It's lying all the time. You can't trust this. So how can you trust any of their science then, if this one tool is total garbage? So that's scary. Something to think about. And of course, we've got a bunch of malicious actors. Could always go in and look for endangered fish or really valuable fish and pull that out. We have internally a bunch of discussions around how we treat this, because we try to be really open, but it's not going to be good if somebody goes and fishes like the last 10 fish of a specific, oopsie, I jumped. Fishes like the last 10 individuals of a species based on our tool's output, right? And you could also get malicious prompting in there. Like you could try to get it to say the opposite of what we are trying to do, right? You could just say, don't establish marine parks, it's a waste of time, for example. But so, and then show, hey, look here, Minero's own tool says this, so I'm gonna put this onto the newspaper's front page now. And by the time somebody went and, hey, this is actually ChatGPT, it's the horse has bolted and everything is bad. So, I have a few slides left, sorry. Biggest problem for me, currently I cannot trust the output 100%. And I work in research, and it would be good if it were correct. Well, what am I doing here if it's not correct? And the way GPT's LLMs are currently trained means that we cannot get to 100% truth. Because in the training process, truth is not the objective. How likely is this answer, given this question, how likely is this rest of text that's coming afterwards? It doesn't care if it's true or not. It's just kind of likely. And the really, really annoying thing with many other AI techniques right now is it's impossible to predict when it goes off track, when it goes haywire. Like some of these questions we saw today are super easy. Any fishery scientist can tell you the answer directly, immediately. And some of them are extremely hard. And with these GPT methods, I can't tell you which one's going to cause problems. We don't know. It's hard to predict. And that's really scary, right? Like the easy questions should always be correct. And it's like, it reminds me of self-driving cars, because if you saw these Tesla leaks recently, sometimes the Tesla drives on a clear day on a straight road and goes, ha, I'm going to drive into that wall now. Kind of similar. Like it's also so hard to predict whether it'll go haywire. This is a question I've been asked quite a bit. Will these things put you or me or anybody out of a job? It honestly depends on how dodgy your bosses are. I was at a talk, I don't know, some of you might have been at this UWA Data Science AI in the Wild conference last week, and then there was a speaker there, and she was like, biggest savings right now in LLMs and GPT-style models are in customer support. Like chatbots for customer support instead of a call center. And in my experience, that's an awful product to have. And it's awful to interact with. Like, did you see this DoorDash support thing on Reddit when somebody was like, what did he say? Hey, the delivery driver drove past my house and he just threw the food out of the window at the house and kept on driving. And then the support window was like, yeah, drivers can customize the delivery experience. It's clearly ChatGPT, right? It kind of got the vibe, but it's terrible. And then, yeah, I don't know if you're following Cory Doctorow much. He's been writing quite a lot about entitification, where you get kind of stuck in a system like DoorDash or Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and then they make the product worse because you can't do anything else slowly and extract more and more values for their own shareholders. And there, LLMs and GPTs help like crazy, right? Because they make a worse product, in my opinion, to pull out more value from you that then goes to the shareholders so they can fire more people. And this is this whole process called entitification. So GPTs, LLMs, we'll see them there a lot in this space. And then, yeah, you have to ask yourself, if you're going to be fired, are your bosses okay with an inferior product? And yeah, then I think you'd be threatened. Sad, right? So what are these things actually good for? Are you okay with a less than 100% correct answer? Storybots, chatbots, fake joke bots, fake test data generation is also really cool. I use it a lot, give me like 10,000 potential fake customers. For that, it's really cool. But then again, you can also write some things that give you fake test data. I use it a lot as partner in writing, not to write the text, but to edit it for clarity. MenuBot, for example, is a really cool open publishing infrastructure that then at the end optionally goes to ChatGPT and says, here's an introduction, please edit for clarity, please don't delete citations, and so on. Super nice for that. For me, the really big killer feature of these methods is large amounts of unstructured text that needs to go into some controlled format. So we saw this with this podcast earlier, right? And that's something I'm really looking at internally with us too, because we got thousands of PDFs that nobody ever wants to parse, because it's a hell to parse PDFs. Thousands of free-written Word files that have some information that somebody should know, but it's been moldy on the hard drive somewhere, and nobody has time to actually parse or read through all these texts. So for this kind of thing, this is the killer feature of these GPTs for me currently, that they can go in and summarize and pull out structured information from massive piles of unstructured text. That does not align with the hype we see. Hype is a lot of, they're all gonna kill us all. I don't know, if you put them in a car, then yeah, they'll probably kill you. But not really, I haven't seen any general intelligence so far. I don't see that. So why the hype? Again, Cory Doctorow. If, on the other hand, the problem is that AI systems just suck and shouldn't be trusted to fly drones or drive cars or decide who gets bail or identify online hate speech or determine your creditworthiness or insurability, then all these AI businesses are out of business. And that's why there's the hype currently. That's partially why the hype gets pushed by some people, because it's these systems are far more brittle and far harder to get to do the right thing than the hype assumes, or that the hype shows to people. I have 2 more slides. Closing words. You don't have to build a torment nexus. I don't know if you remember this street. Sci-fi author. In my book, I invented a torment nexus as a cautionary tale. Tech company. At long last, we've created a torment nexus from the classic sci-fi novel. Don't create a torment nexus. And we're kind of building a torment nexus here together right now. So please don't do that. You don't have to. Very last slide. This is from an old IBM training manual from the 70s. 1975 or 76. A computer can never be held accountable. So it must never make a management decision. But like even my work, every day I can have to print this and hang it up. Every day I have to tell myself, please don't build this management decision maker. Please build a management support, or please build a general public support tool. That's I think that's about it. Next financial year, next month, I'll be hiring a research assistant in this space. It's a lot of play. Been there for a year. I've been playing 50% of the time with stuff. What else? So it's a lot of dirty data. If you ever want to see the dirtiest data in existence, come along. The most incomplete reference databases you can think of, come along. Yeah, that's my email there if you have any questions. I think we have after this, we also have heaps time to talk anyway, right? Thank you very much.